All right, welcome back to another mask video. Today we're going to cover a whole bunch of fun topics, including my top picks for the KN95. That's been a common request of people that like that style of mask. I'll talk more about that. As usual, I always like to tell you what I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to throw that data up there. But first, so what are we going to talk about today? Who am I? What are my qualifications? And what is this fancy test apparatus that I use? It's been a few videos since I've talked about that from my earliest video, which is not very well made. So I'm going to revisit that today. I'm going to talk about how to KN95s and how to KF94 stack up against the gold standard of a NIOSH approved N95. I'm going to add another column to my table called the quality factor. We'll talk about what is the quality factor. And then I'm going to dive into the KN95 comparison. What are my top picks? What are some ones that I've tested? And some latest data, and then we'll go from there. So with all that said, here is the latest data set. There's going to be some additions of the NIOSH N95, some KN95 masks that I tested, and that's what's going to be up there. So not a huge data set. Next video will be even more. Okay, so let's dive into who am I and why do I make this channel. So I'm Aaron Collins. Put my full name on there. I wasn't trying to make some crazy cool YouTube channel name. I just did it because I already had one for my bike videos. If you ever want to watch some guy ride around in a muddy field, my channel will be very interesting to you. But if you don't, totally understand. My background is that I have an undergraduate degree and a master's degree from the University of Minnesota. My graduate work was looking at ultrafine particle loss in aerosol diluters. Yeah, my background is really, I spent a lot of time thinking and spending time with aerosols. So I did my undergrad and graduate degree in that space, interested in aerosol science. At the same time as my undergraduate and graduate, and after I graduated, I worked at probably one of the largest, second largest aerosol instrumentation and equipment companies in the U.S. I worked there as an undergraduate, graduate, as an engineer there, an elite engineer on one of the products that we developed. And my background has been in aerosol instrumentation. So when we talk about the next slide in the apparatus, condensation particle counters, my work there was developing them. In fact, I have patents and multiple papers, journal articles and white papers in the space of that space, because that was my passion, that was my interest. It still is in some ways. I just expanded it to other avenues. I still work with regularly in the nano and micro scale, but it's just expanded a little bit broader to not just aerosols. So my background is in that space, and I have measured filtration efficiency not for masks. That was not what I didn't do a lot of space in the occupational space, but that is my background, is aerosol science. You can read my thesis if you're ever interested. It's ultrafine particle loss in aerosol diluters. If you Google that, you can read it. Not that great of a read. Wouldn't recommend it, unless you're looking to go to bed at night. Throw it up then. So that's kind of who I am. That's kind of how I know all the terms and all the lingo. And you're probably wondering, well, why do you have all that equipment in your basement? That's kind of weird. So it turns out that if you watch public auction sites, sometimes you can find old scientific equipment going for very, very cheap. Applied Science on YouTube, one of my favorite channels to watch. He does that all the time. He gets really cool instruments in his, he has a sim in his garage. That's awesome. But you can find stuff really cheap that's maybe broken, and you can take apart and kind of understand how it works. And so I was buying equipment that way, where I'd buy something for a couple $100 and take it apart and just understand how it was built. And so I have a basement, with a lot of old stuff. And when the pandemic hit, I happen to have some of the key things you need. I had a working 3025A in my basement, TSI ultrafine CPC, the condensation particle counter. I happen to have a port account and the N95 companion. Now the port account was broken, so it didn't work, but the N95 companion had all the things I needed, the tubing, the water trap, and all those test ports that I use. All that came from an N95 companion that I happen to have in my basement. So the timing was just right. I realized in July, I have all the stuff I can test face masks. Maybe I should test face masks. So that's how that came about. I didn't buy a lot of this for the mask testing. I just kind of had it, and so I've kind of adapted it and made it work to do the mask testing. The aerosol generator also came with that TSI N95 companion, so that's where that came from. Okay, so you're probably wondering, like, what is this apparatus that you use, and what is it? So what I'm using is typical lab grade instrumentation. I just happened to do it in my bathroom because I needed a small room. What I do is I have a TSI 3025A. It's an ultrafine condensation particle counter. And so this counter will count particles from 2.5 nanometers up to, around 3 micron or 3,000 nanometers. Frame of reference, the test aerosol I'm using is about 60 nanometers, so it's on the small side. And most respiratory droplets are, between 0.5 and 10 microns. So they're on the much bigger side. So, and all these CPCs work on kind of the smaller side of particles. They are a single particle counter, meaning every particle that comes in, they count one at a time, roughly. There's some nuance there, but if you're an aerosol nerd, you'll be like, hey, Aaron, why didn't you talk about coincidence and stuff like that? There's a good paper out there by someone who wrote that too. But for this discussion, we're going to ignore that. Why is that important? Well, the nice thing about condensation particles, or single particle counters specifically, is that they have a huge range of concentration. And they can measure on the very, very low end, 0.001 or 0.01 particles per cc. And a cc is a cubic centimeter, centimeter cubed, is about the size of a sugar cube. So we can measure it from 1 particle in there per cc, or 0.1, or on average less than 1, all the way up to easily 20 to 30,000. So that's almost 5 orders of magnitude in terms of resolution. So they work really good to resolve filtration efficiency. And I happen to have the right tool for that. Now, I have that 3295A. It's connected to a moisture trap that comes from the port account. I do that so that if any spit or moisture condenses in the line, it doesn't go into the instrument. It gets caught before it goes in there. I then have a 30 thousandths orifice, and I use that because when I breathe in and out, I'm changing the pressure inside that mask, and the pump inside the system has to adapt to that. And so what can happen is I can have pressure swings. And so by putting an orifice there and restricting it, I limit the range of pressure that the CPC sees, so it sees a much more consistent flow rate. We'll talk more about that in that equation over there. It operates in the high flow mode, so I have about 1.5 liters per minute. And then basically what I do is I measure the ambient concentration, and then I connect it to the mask, and I measure the in-mask concentration. And the difference between those two, and I'll talk about that equation, computes the filtration efficiency. I also have a TSI 8026 aerosol generator. I use now a 16% sodium chloride solution. I used a TSI nanoscan about a few videos back to characterize it, and I got around 60 nanometer count median diameter with a 1.76 geometric standard deviation. That's describing the profile or the size distribution of the aerosol that I generate. I do it in room air, so there is some background counts that are also present. To compute the filtration efficiency, that's that Greek symbol that looks like an N, it's eta. It's 1 minus the penetration. How do you compute that? Well, normally you would measure the number of particles in the mask and the number of particles in the ambient air. Since I'm using a CPC that continuously samples, basically you can take the concentration times the flow rate to get that. And so the equation is 1 minus the concentration of the mask times the flow rate of the CPC over the concentration in the ambient, multiplied by the flow rate of the CPC. Now, if we assume the flow rate of the CPC is constant, that falls off, and so you can just simply calculate this by taking the concentration in the mask and the concentration in the ambient, and what I do is a 20-second average. So if you watch any of my supplementary videos, which I'm a little behind on publishing those out there, I'm sorry, I've just been super busy, but I always do like a 20-second average to try it. So is my data perfect? Not at all. There are some caveats to it. I'll cover that next video about how does my aerosol compare to like what we expect from COVID, from respiratory droplets. Why does it mean anything? It's a consistent aerosol size. It happens to fall at the most penetrating particle size, and we'll talk more about in the next video. It happens to fall at the most penetrating particle size for most of these masks, and it's just a consistent metric that we can compare other masks to. So should you take my numbers as absolute? No. If I show 99%, it does not mean that it actually is at 99%. Most likely it's actually higher than that. But it also depends on my face fit. So I do this as an as-fitted mask. So it's not just the media, it's the media plus how well it fits my face. And I always try to talk about that. But what it does let me do is compare masks between each other. And so I'm starting to generate some control masks, and we'll talk more about that. So that leads me to the next point. How does he stack up against a standard N95? That's a question a lot of people ask. I haven't had one. I had an N100 control, and I've had some other masks that I've been using as a control, but I've never had a N95. And so I actually got a hold of an N95. Someone was nice enough to send me one of their stacks. This is a 3M 8210 N95. This is like a super common, probably one of the most common N95s out there. They're worn by healthcare workers. And so I got my hands on one of them and I tested it. So I'm going to throw the data up here, and we're going to talk about how do the N95s stack out against everything else. So what's most interesting is that the 3M 8210, I'm just going to throw up the full table to make my life easier. That's the NIOSH N95 99.4% filtration efficiency, 0.18 inches of pressure drop. And we'll talk about that new column towards the end there. And that's the filtration quality factor. And so it tested well, and it compared to the N100 that I wore the same test. Sorry, I'm just double checking to make sure I'm doing this in the order that I wanted to do it in. Yes, I'm going to talk about the quality factor next. I had to make sure from the beginning of the video that this all matches up. All right, so it performed well. It's kind of the gold standard. It performed kind of like, why isn't the N100 better? Well, the problem is the face fit's going to dominate. We're talking fractions of a percent. All of these are technically would qualify as a well-fitting mask if you used like the standard NIOSH qualitative fit or quantitative fit, excuse me. So it's going to be hard to resolve much higher than this, but it highlights like this is where this is where a 3M stands, 99.4. What does this mean? Well, I mean, we tested some other ones, and I'll just jump into how do they perform. I'll test some other NIOSH ones, like the Respokare. This is a NIOSH N95 rated mask from NNX. This was sent to me by another viewer. And like I said, I always try to disclose where I got masks from. This came from a viewer. It's lot number 200-3041A. I had tested it, got about 98.3% filtration efficiency and a 0.35. And we'll talk more about this mask later. It's very interesting. It smells like vinegar. I think that's whatever the magic virus killing stuff in here. Oh boy, it smells like vinegar. The other mask we tested was the Deme N95. Now, one thing that's unique about the N95 style, this is a KN95 shape, but it's an N95 rated mask. You notice foam seal, also with the Respokare foam seal. How do they stack up? 98.3 and 98.6. Pressure drop is a little high, 0.35 and 0.4 for these two masks respectively. But the point I'm trying to make is that we can look at some old data below it. So there's a column below prior data. We look at like the Filter 95, the Botten face mask, all those masks. What you see is that, you know, most of those masks have 99% plus. So I think the whole point I was trying to make is that, you know, people have asked, well, are KF94 or KN95 masks as good as an N95? Based on my test aerosol and the data that I'm getting, yeah, some of them are on the order of N95. So to me, there's no reason to go off and purchase these because we still have a shortage for healthcare workers. I know I've said it many times. These are still in hot demand for healthcare workers. This came from someone's personal stash. I didn't take it from a healthcare worker, at least as far as I know. They'd already been purchased and they were just sitting around. So thank you for sending those. But it gives me a really good frame of reference. So if this is performing well and the masks that I'm showing you are performing well, I have confidence that they are at an N95 level of performance, assuming you can get a good face fit. My face is unique. All the data I'm showing is always my test aerosol to my face. I just use it as a way to compare masks. Okay, so you'll probably see that new column on there. We'll talk more about my mask reviews in a little bit. We'll go through each one of those. But what is this new QF column? It stands for the quality factor. The quality factor is a way scientists and engineers use to compare filter media. And so I'm going to use that to compare masks. It compares two factors for a mask: pressure drop and filtration efficiency. Those are the two things that go together to make a mask in terms of how well it performs. And so the quality factor is the number that's kind of comparing like how much pressure drop do you get to get that level of filtration efficiency. A higher number is better. Let's take the gold standard 3M 8210. It had the highest QF value, the quality factor that I've tested to date, 28.1. I'm not surprised by that. 3M makes some great media. They're the industry leader in this space. They have the best media. So basically 28.1 means great efficiency and it has a really good pressure drop. So good mask. How do the other masks stack against that? So let's talk about it. I'll throw that data back up. So the Respokare, NIOSH, these guys are in the 11s and 10s. We look at some good KN95s, the Boneafide, Powecom. This has a port with a piece of duct tape. You'll know why in the next video. These guys are looking really good, 14s and 15s. And then we get to some of the KF94 masks, which even do better. The Bluna Face Fit, 20.5. I mean, 3M still takes the the cream of the crop. They're the best one. But the KF94 masks, look at them. They're all consistently in the high teens or into the 20s, whereas only some of the KN95s and even these actual N95 NIOSH rated ones are not even that comparatively close when we add in the quality factor. So to me, this highlights, there are good masks out there. That's what I'm trying to review. What are the best options you can get at? There are still protective masks out there. So if you're a mask nerd, that QF factor is your mask nerdification, right? Higher is better. And so it highlights to me that KF94 masks are really good. The next video is going to be really good too. I have a mask that's kind of approaching 3M quality and it has some other really cool features. I think it's the future of masks in my opinion. So next video will be very exciting. Okay, so that's how so that's how the quality factors. You'll be seeing that as a new column in my analysis. Let's jump into the review of the mask. So let's jump into the I keep saying that, 3M 8210, the 3M 8210 gold standard N95. Nose midge is a thick hunk of metal. I mean, I kind of pull it away a little bit. I shouldn't have done that because I think I broke the glue a little bit when I did it. But if you look at that, I'll try to get that on camera. I'm looking at let's even get in there. Focus not on me. But anyways, it is a thick, probably 30 thousandths piece of aluminum, super crazy stiff. I mean, it's a great mask. Elasticity on these things is amazing. really a good mask. Don't buy them though. Leave them for healthcare workers. I think, you know, but what are the cons of this mask? Man, fashion-wise, you know, you got warning. This respirator helps protect. I mean, who, you know, if you only care about protection and you want the best, you know, I guess that's it. But save these for healthcare workers. They're not cool. They don't look cool. They're comfortable-wise, they're okay. Headbands are a little tight. I'm not sure if there's a sizing information on this one. I don't know if I didn't look at if there's a small or medium available for that or how that sizing works with that one. But it's tight to the face. We tested two others, so I'll go to the Respokare. The Respokare, lot number 234-1-A. This was sent to me by a person that had ordered them directly. They shipped by, I believe from Taiwan. They're not a US-based company. He had ordered it. It came to him. Filtration efficiency-wise, pretty good. Came in at 98.3%. Pressure drop, not great, 0.35. The QF factor, the quality factor, 11.6. What is the, you know, so a lot of people have asked me about this mask back when I very first started doing the YouTube videos. What about the Respokare? Test the Respokare. And I didn't want to because they were really expensive and they had a long lead time. You know, you had to wait 3 weeks to get them. I'm glad I never bought one. So good filtration efficiency. And they have the big thing about them is the virus killing magic that happens inside of it. We'll talk about sanitation in the next video. I don't think you need to sanitize masks. I think it's excessive if they're your own masks. We'll talk about that next video. But here's the great thing about it. It smells like vinegar. I mean, it is overpoweringly smells like vinegar. Whatever they're using, the chemical in it to kill the virus smells like vinegar. And so you wear the mask, it has headbands, and it is intensely like just breathing out of a vinegar bottle. It is, I don't consider myself a very sensitive nose, but I could not wear this for very long because it's like, the smell just would not go away. You sometimes breathe in, you get that tingle in your nose, like, whoa. I don't understand where their business was going with that, but I think it's the one you can pass on, not unless you like smelling of vinegar. All right, so another N95 that was sent to me by a viewer who had also sent me this other NIOSH, the 3M one. So thank you for sending those. Thank you very much, actually. I really appreciate that. This is the Deme N95. They are a US-based manufacturer. They're making a KN style mask. Performance-wise, 98.6 for on my face, so a pretty good face seal. Pressure drop's pretty good, 0.4. It's a little on the high side. Because of that, I got full collapse. So the quality factor, 10.7, so it's kind of on the order of the Respokare. You know, it's basically a KN95 with head loops, and they added a foam nose bridge, in the nose bridge. Nose bridge wire isn't really super stiff. It's long, very long, which is good. You want to see that in these kind of masks. It fit my face fine. Inside's comfort. But it's just kind of basically like a head looped KN95. But it is a full NIOSH approved. So if you were curious about how they stacked up, should I go buy a NIOSH N95? I don't think the cost is really there. I mean, they think they're $7 or $8 a piece. I don't think it's worth the money. Okay, we also tested the XAM-MED. This is a very exciting one. Sorry, I had my mask all screwed up here because this is the second time I've shot this video. The XAM-MED. These come from Lowe's. I had stopped in there. This is all they had. They actually carried two brands. They were all sold out of the other one or didn't have any on the shelf. So I bought the XAM-MED, 20 bucks. No lot ID on the container. This is what the package looks like if you get them. They look like this. This is the XAM-MED. Not a great mask. Is it protective? Yes. It's not fake, so good for Lowe's for doing their due diligence. Is it a protective mask? Yes. Is it a good mask? Not great. What are the positives? It's got a good thick nose wire on it. They used a really thick external nose wire, so good on them for that. Face fit, I had pretty good face fit. I tested it both as I'm wearing it. You know, I got a good face seal, and I got about 96.43%. 96.43. And then I went like this to see if I could get any improvement. I wasn't sure if I was getting leaking, and it kind of went up to 98.86. So, you know, it's protective. It's pretty solid in performance. Pressure drop's pretty abysmal, 0.65. It actually has, I think, the lowest quality factor of a mask I've tested. So is it protective? Yes. Is it a good mask? Yeah, the quality factor's kind of shown. It's like you're paying that premium of a pressure drop to get that level. And I think there's other masks that provide similar levels of protection without nearly the pressure drop. Also not cheap, $2 a mask. But if you're in a bind and like, I need a mask tomorrow, this would be an option. Not my favorite, but it is a protective mask. So good for Lowe's for not selling people junk. I only tested one of those, so hard to say what the quality variation within the masks are. That's always a limitation of my testing. I only test one because I just don't have enough time to do all of the masks. I also tested the Yiwu Kaoshidun. This is a eBay mask. someone had sent me a whole bunch of KF94s and some of these, and as a you know, I said I would test it for him because as a thank you for sending me so many masks, which will be in the next video. I couldn't say no. So he had purchased this from eBay. This is, so basically I'm just calling this an eBay mask. It was very cheap. The question was, were they real? He's curious, were they real? The answer is yes, they were real. 96.3% filtration efficiency, 0.45% pressure drop. Not a great mask. Nose wire is pretty weak. Quality factor, 7.4. So it's kind of on the bottom end. Is it a protective mask? Yes. Is it a good mask? Not really. Should you buy eBay masks? No. I was hoping I'd get a fake. Kind of a little bit. I mean, I think he did the due diligence he asked for the CE certification and stuff like that. They actually supplied it, so it was probably a good indication they were not fake if they actually would supply that to you. But anyways, it's a mask. Don't avoid eBay and Amazon only because there's no way to know if they're good until you have them. And there's all kinds of fakes floating around. I've tested a few myself. I stopped looking for fakes because they're easy to find. Go to eBay, sort by the cheapest mask, order them. 50%, like a chunk of them are fake. Great. What does that do? Nothing, because it just says don't go to eBay. So I figured I'd identify suppliers with consistent supply chains that you could buy from. That's the goal of the video. Okay. Let's see, what else did I cover? So those are all the KN95. So I'm going to jump now into my KN95 selection of masks. What are my top KN95 picks? Well, even though they all look the same, they're not all the same. That's kind of the thing. So I'm going to throw up a graphic over here. So I'm going to pop it up here. This is an image showing the blue is the Arun internal nose clip mask, and the background is that green is the Filter 95. And what I'm trying to overlay them to show them that even though they're both KN95, they have very different shapes. And so what it means is that it's really hard to say all the same. So originally on the KN95s, I was going to measure, and maybe I'll fit it here, so if not, this doesn't work, the vertical direction and the width direction this way for those masks. So for example, I have my data here, but I set it over here. Sorry, I'm not gonna edit. So for example, the Arun is 157 length, 105 width, and then the Filter 95 is 155 by 107. So I thought these two masks look within a few millimeters of each other in terms of the measurements that I made. But when I kind of compared them in this image that I'll put back up, they're really different shapes. Even though there's only a few millimeter difference, you get a totally different shape. So it highlights again that face fit and mask shape. You really just need, I mean, it sucks because we kind of are buying stuff on the internet, but buy as few as you need, try them, and then up your quantity once you're comfortable with them. Because the Boneafide, might be a smaller mask, and I'll put the table up of the dimensions that I measured, but I don't think it's a great metric because like I'm showing in the image prior, they have a different shape. Like even though the numbers look the same, they have different angles, and that all has an impact on your face fit. So I'll put up the dimensions that I measured from each KN95. I'll just toss it up right here. So there's a table of like, if you want to pause it, here's all the width and heights measurements. So I just measured here and I measured here, so I'll put it back up. So I did that for all those masks. Is it super meaningful? Maybe. There are bigger ones, there are smaller ones, like the Deme was pretty big at 160. I think it was the biggest, and the smallest is the XAM-MED, the Respokare at 145. Which makes sense because I forgot to mention that. I actually tore the bottom of this mask when I was wearing it because it was too small for my face. So I'll throw that. But so how do we pick then the best KN95? Well, I think the quality factor is that's why I kind of brought that back into the discussion is the quality factor. We can kind of use that as our baseline. So if I look at all the KN95s that I've been, the Boneafide and Arun are two that have the highest quality factor. Let me find the Arun. Ooh, here it is. So this is the two that I'm going to recommend, and I'll talk about why, and I'll give you an example about why it's important. Now these two both fit my face pretty well, and so the sizing is pretty similar. It's hard to show. I guess I can show them back to back. They're pretty similar, but they definitely have a slightly different shape, right? And so they both fit myself, so maybe that means that it's not the exact same, but every face is different, so it's hard to say what matters. So the quality factor for the Boneafide Powecom is about 14 to 18, depending on which one, the headband versus that, which changes the fit a little bit. Remember, the quality factor includes the full mask in this scenario and includes face fit, so those are also now part of that, which isn't perfect, but it's a good way to explain that number, I think, to people. And then we look at the Arun. It's a little lower. The external nose that I had a really good seal on is, in the 11, 8 to 14. So they're kind of in the same ballpark. I think if you really want high filtration efficiency, that Arun, really good. And then the other criteria about why I recommend these two is they both have emergency use authorization from the FDA. The Arun is listed in there. I can't remember the name of the manufacturer off the top of my head. I'll have to put it in a little blinking box down here. They're listed as a UAE, and Powecom, they have a weird company name. It's like Powecom Insurance Labor something. It's kind of a weird Chinese name. I'm not really sure, or Chinese maybe the English name. I'm not sure why they had it so weird. Both of these have emergency use authorizations. So that means that there are some other pieces of data that have been submitted to them, which gives them some credence. So these are why these are still my top picks. And I'll talk about the other reason that they are, and I'll use my Filter 95. Now, is the Filter 95 bad? No, it just has this issue that they put a really weak nose bridge on it, and for my face, that didn't work very well. Everyone has different faces. The other thing that I got to knock on the Filter 95 is they're sold in boxes of 100. So you're dropping $100 on a mask that may or may not fit. Whereas you can buy these in tens for like $10 now, or $12, or maybe a little bit more than that. But they're really inexpensive. These are a little more expensive, $2. But relative to what I'm seeing on Amazon and eBay, I'm seeing these go for like $3.50, $4 a mask. Like, get out of here. Go to real good sources and you get these much cheaper. Don't waste your time on that. All right, Filter 95. The other reason I have it, I'm going to use this as an example. I'm going to crease the nose wire, and I'm going to show you how weak the nose clip was on this one, and as an example of why it gave me issues and I couldn't get a face fit. So I'm just going to clip it, and then I'm just going to pull the mask apart slowly. Watch how quickly it just opens back up, right? If I do that with that external nose clip, Arun N95, I do the same thing. Watch how long that nose bridge stays together. Still there. It doesn't just immediately flatten out. Now it finally did, but I stretched that mask way out. It is a much, much stiffer nose bridge or nose wire in the Arun mask. And the Boneafide, also the same thing. They're using, it's not as stiff as the Arun, but it's good enough. I still had good performance with it. So if we compare that, this is the headband version, but we'll just do the same thing. So, it still holds pretty well. But this Filter 95 one is it's just really a weak nose wire, and it kills them. The other thing that I like about these is length of nose wire. So this is the longest one of the masks that I tested. You notice that they use the external. When we look at those NIOSH N95, like the Respokare, also are doing that. It's a good sign. 3M does it with this one, but man, it's a mega thick nose wire. I wish more people use that kind of gauge. Really, yeah, gold standard right there. But this one's really good too. And then the Deme Tech is an internal, but they use a pretty long one as well. They're about roughly the same length as this one. When we compare that to the Powecom's maybe about 5 to 5 millimeters shorter than the external one, but it's still pretty stiff, so I still give it the thumbs up. And we compare that to the Filter 95 is almost like, it's like 5 or 7 millimeters shorter, plus it's weaker, so when you stack all that up, it's not great. So when you're thinking about KN95s, those are my recommendations. I've tested a bunch of them, but again, in the end of the day, a protective mask is the most important. The next important thing is it's easy to breathe, and the last thing is that you can wear it all day and you have a good face fit. So those are the kind of things you want to consider. So those are my top picks for the KN95s. I know a lot of people have been asking, like, what's your favorite KN95? Why do I recommend KN95? Some face fits work well for KN95. So some people that have a very elongated nose and profile, sometimes the KN95s fit. So, I think 95% of people can wear a KF94, and I think they're better. And I think the quality factor data shows that. But for some face fits, people like these better. If you have a really strong jaw or a longer nose, the KN95 seem to fit better. So I wanted to give some recommendations in there because I hadn't really talked about them much in my videos. So there we have it. My recommendations. We'll jump into, okay, what's next? So, wow, there's some really great masks I got coming up next. I'm going to cover how does my test aerosol compare to COVID. I'm going to cover the famous water test and blowing out the lighter test. Are those a good ways to determine face masks? I don't know, but I'll talk more about that. And then coming up after that, we'll talk about what is the future of masks. I think I have the future, what we're going to see future of protective masks. I have it with me. I tested it, and that's going to be some really exciting data. So hang in there. So as usual, if you want to subscribe, go ahead. If you see bike videos, the pandemic's over. Throw comments in the box below. I'll answer whatever I can. And feel free to share this to other people. Help spread the message about protective masks. That's really all I really ask. And then otherwise, thank you, and I will catch you on the next video, which should be out shortly.